The rancher had been living alone for as long as he could remember. His cabin, a weathered structure of timber and stone, sat atop a small hill overlooking endless fields of Montana prairie. The wind whistled through the valleys, and the distant mountains stood as silent witnesses to his quiet life. He had chosen solitude years ago, after a string of disappointments and losses that had left him wary of people and their complicated attachments. Life on the ranch was hard but predictable. Sunrise brought chores, feeding cattle, repairing fences, and tending the sparse garden behind the cabin. Nights were quiet, the only company a crackling fireplace and the occasional howl of a coyote. It was a lonely existence, but one he had grown accustomed to, and even come to value. That evening, a storm rolled in from the west, dark clouds blotting out the fading sun. The wind picked up, rattling the cabin's windows, and the first drops of rain began to fall, heavy and insistent. He was about to pour himself a cup of coffee and sit by the fire when the door handle rattled violently. Startled, he set the mug down, his hand instinctively reaching for the old hunting rifle propped in the corner. "Who's there?" he called, his voice gruff but tense. The door burst open, and a woman stumbled inside, soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her face. In her arms was a baby, crying in protest against the storm. "Please, help us," she gasped, her voice trembling, both from the cold and fear. The rancher's instincts, long tuned to the wilderness, kicked in immediately. Despite the surprise, he stepped forward, closing the door against the wind. He grabbed a blanket from the shelf and draped it over her shoulders. "Sit down," he said, keeping his tone calm, though his heart raced. She lowered herself onto a chair near the fire, holding the infant tightly. Her blue eyes, wide and frightened, met his with unspoken urgency. The baby, a small boy no more than a few months old, whimpered softly, his tiny fists pressing against her chest. The rancher fetched a cup of warm water and some bread from the pantry. He set them on the table. "You'll need to warm up first," he said, watching as she offered a cautious nod. Questions swirled in his mind. Who was she? How had she ended up here, miles from any town? But for now, none of that mattered. There was a storm outside, a cabin that could offer shelter, and a child who needed warmth. He couldn't turn them away. For the first time in years, the rancher felt a flicker of something long buried, concern, responsibility, maybe even hope. As the fire crackled and the storm raged outside, he realized his life, once quiet and solitary, had just changed forever. The arrival of a desperate mother and her baby had turned his routine upside down, introducing uncertainty, and perhaps, for the first time in a long while, connection. The cabin, which had always been his refuge from the world, was now a haven for strangers, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something new. The storm outside raged on through the night, but inside the cabin, a fragile sense of calm began to settle. Clara, the widow, held her infant son, Eli, close to her chest, letting the warmth of the fire seep through her soaked clothes. The rancher, still cautious but increasingly concerned, busied himself with practicalities. He fetched extra blankets, hung wet clothes to dry over the fire, and poured another cup of steaming water. The cabin, once silent and orderly, now carried the soft noises of new life, the crackle of the fire, Eli's occasional coo, and the measured breathing of a mother trying to regain composure. Where did you come from?" the rancher finally asked, breaking the heavy silence. Clara's lips trembled as she explained, her voice quiet but urgent. Their small town had been engulfed by fire, forcing her to flee with only what she could carry. She had traveled for hours, terrified and exhausted, until she spotted the faint glow of the cabin lights. The rancher listened silently, his eyes scanning the horizon through the window, imagining the treacherous journey through rain and darkness she must have faced. He offered her some dry clothes and a bowl of warm stew. Clara accepted gratefully, her hands shaking as she fed Eli a small portion of bread first, testing the baby's tolerance. The rancher watched from across the room, a strange mixture of curiosity and concern twisting in his chest. He wasn't used to having visitors, let alone people depending on him. But there was something in Clara's eyes, a determination, a quiet strength, that reminded him of better days long gone. As the night deepened, the storm gradually softened to a persistent drizzle. Outside, the prairie lay hidden beneath sheets of mist and rain, while inside, the cabin hummed with the small, steady rhythm of survival. Clara talked softly to Eli, humming a lullaby that sounded almost foreign to the rancher, yet comforting in its gentleness. He found himself drawn into the intimacy of the moment, realizing that he had almost forgotten what it meant to nurture and protect someone beyond himself. Hours passed. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across the worn walls of the cabin. Clara finally rested her head against a chair, Eli cradled safely in her arms. The rancher, standing nearby, felt an unfamiliar ache, a blend of longing and apprehension. He had always chosen solitude, yet now he couldn't imagine leaving them alone in this world. The storm outside had brought chaos, but it had also brought him an unexpected responsibility, and with it, a chance for connection he hadn't dared hope for. By morning, the rain had subsided, leaving the prairie glistening under the pale sunlight. The rancher made breakfast while Clara dressed and fed Eli. There was no talk of leaving, no plan for the future, just a simple, quiet agreement that for now, the cabin was a safe place. And for the first time in years, the rancher realized that his life, once defined by empty rooms and long, lonely nights, might just be beginning anew. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet rhythm of the rancher's life began to shift in ways he hadn't anticipated. Clara and Eli had settled into the cabin as if it had always been theirs, and the rancher found himself adjusting to a new routine. Mornings started earlier now, with the soft cries of the baby echoing through the wooden walls. He learned to change diapers, prepare bottles, and soothe the small cries that punctuated the otherwise serene prairie mornings. Though he'd lived alone for years, the presence of another human being, and especially a child, made the world feel both overwhelming and wondrous. Clara, resilient and patient, began teaching him small things about childcare he had never thought necessary: how to swaddle Eli properly, how to recognize the subtle signals of hunger, and how to calm a fussy infant with gentle rocking. He listened intently, sometimes fumbling, but always learning. And in return, he offered them something they desperately needed: stability and protection. The rancher's eyes, once trained only on fences and cattle, now noticed Clara's weary smiles, the soft laughter she shared with Eli, and the tiny milestones that marked the baby's growth. Work on the ranch also continued, but now it carried a different meaning. Feeding the cattle, mending fences, and hauling firewood felt less like chores and more like acts of provision, acts that sustained not just himself, but a small family. On particularly long afternoons, he would catch Clara humming to Eli by the window, her hand brushing back strands of hair from the baby's forehead. He realized, often with a pang of unfamiliar emotion, that the cabin no longer felt empty. It was alive, full of warmth, and brimming with the possibility of something he had long thought lost: companionship. Evenings became the most cherished time. After dinner, they would gather near the fire, Clara cradling Eli while the rancher repaired tools or simply watched. Conversations flowed slowly at first, filled with cautious questions and measured answers. But as the days passed, they shared memories, hopes, and small joys. He told stories of the prairie, of winters harsher than this one, and Clara spoke softly of her past, never dwelling on sorrow, only on the lessons learned. Through it all, Eli's laughter, bright and pure, echoed between them, a constant reminder of the fragile, beautiful connection that had begun to form. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the rancher stepped outside to watch the horizon. Clara's voice called him back inside, urging him to see Eli's first steps. The baby wobbled and tottered across the cabin floor, Clara's hands ready to catch him, the rancher's heart swelling with pride and affection. In that moment, he understood something profound. His years of solitude, the quiet evenings by the fire, had not been wasted. They had prepared him for this, a life rich with love, responsibility, and hope. The cabin, once a sanctuary of loneliness, had become a home, and his heart, long shuttered against the world, was finally open. Winter had fully settled over the Montana prairie, draping the hills and fields in a soft blanket of snow. The cold, once a solitary challenge for the rancher, now felt different, less harsh and more manageable, shared as it was with Clara and Eli. The cabin, once quiet and stark, now hummed with life, the soft coos of a baby, the crackle of firewood, and the gentle murmur of conversation between two adults learning to become a family. Every corner of the home seemed warmer, infused with laughter, care, and small routines that had grown into cherished rituals. Mornings were now a flurry of activity. Eli woke early, his tiny hands reaching out for warmth and attention. The rancher, who had once prided himself on solitary efficiency, learned the art of patience, feeding and dressing the baby while Clara prepared breakfast. They spoke in soft tones, coordinating tasks without words at times, a silent understanding forming between them. The rancher discovered an unexpected joy in watching Eli grow. Each milestone, from crawling to tentative steps, felt like a triumph shared by all three of them. Outside, the ranch demanded attention even in winter. Snowdrifts needed clearing, fences reinforced against the weight of ice, and the cattle required careful tending. Yet these tasks, once tedious and lonely, now carried a different meaning. They were acts of care, not just for himself, but for Clara and Eli, a family that depended on him. Clara, too, adapted to ranch life, helping feed the animals and learning to navigate the challenges of winter on the prairie. They worked side by side, their companionship growing stronger with every shared task and quiet glance. Evenings became sacred. They would gather around the fire, Clara cradling Eli while the rancher sipped coffee and listened to her soft lullabies. Conversation flowed more freely now, filled with laughter, storytelling, and dreams for the future. The rancher marveled at how quickly life had changed, from years of isolation to a home full of love and responsibility. The cabin, with its sturdy walls and worn wooden floors, had transformed into a sanctuary not only from the elements but from the loneliness that had once defined him. One particularly quiet night, as snow fell gently outside, the rancher found himself sitting beside Clara and Eli by the fire. The baby slept peacefully in her arms, a small, content smile on his face. The rancher reached out, taking Clara's hand in his, feeling the warmth of connection he had long denied himself. "I never imagined life like this," he said softly. Clara smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes," she replied, "life finds a way to surprise us." In that moment, he understood. The years of solitude, the hardships endured, the quiet evenings by the fire, they had all led to this. A chance encounter at his cabin had brought Clara and Eli into his life, changing everything. He had found not only companionship but purpose, love, and a family. The rancher, once lonely and guarded, now looked out at the snow-covered prairie with a heart full of gratitude. The cabin, their home, was no longer a place of isolation. It was the heart of a family, a testament to hope, resilience, and the unexpected ways life can transform when least expected.